We start this manhwa with our boy holding a knife pressed coldly against someone's throat. The man reacted in stunned disbelief, unable to process the immediate danger. As menaced him with a knife, the guy, desperate and trembling, pleaded that if money was the issue, he could pay whatever was demanded. Meanwhile's eyes blazed with violet light as he could care less. With a sudden, decisive strike, a dramatic burst of ketchup explodes across the scene, signaling the intensity of the attack. We then transition. The aftermath gives way to a quieter moment as a drowsy high school student trudges toward school under the bright sky, muttering that he feels unbearably sleepy. Trudged through, weary from a sleepless night of secret work, silently acknowledging the difficulty of balancing his exhausting routine with the burden of being an assassin. However, as he stepped into the classroom, the students immediately whispered to each other that he had arrived, their murmurs making him painfully aware of the tense attention now focused on him. The confident soccer ace and unofficial class leader greeted with a cheerful wave, his upbeat energy setting a friendly tone for the morning. However, clearly annoyed, sat down at his desk and dismissed greeting with a sharp retort, leaving his classmate momentarily startled by the abrupt change in mood. However, some amusement quickly faded as she folded her arms and vented her irritation about, internally complaining that she couldn't stand him. In the tense classroom, confronted with irritation, questioning why he bothered talking to their classmate, while he calmly defended his actions by reminding her that they should not be so harsh. The tense silence was broken as, his expression stern and annoyed, entered the room unexpectedly while the door rattled behind him. As four students turned their irritated gazes toward the classroom entrance, voiced her annoyance by remarking that someone even worse had just arrived. The defiant leader of a notorious group of delinquents stands confidently in his school uniform as he makes his intimidating first impression in the classroom. As entered the classroom, his duo greeted him eagerly, prompting to respond with a casual acknowledgement. As strode confidently into the tense classroom, he turned his attention towards our boy. As stepped forward and loomed over, he called out sharply to grab his attention, his irritation clear in the tense air. However, when there was no response, he muttered with growing annoyance that had already passed out, grumbling that some people always had it easy. Suddenly, alarmed, reached out with a sharp motion to try to choke our boy. At that instant, his determined hand clamped tightly around his wrist, halting his movement with undeniable force. His face tense and eyes wide, suddenly reacted in alarm to an unexpected event, exclaiming in disbelief at what had just occurred. His face contorted in frustration, demanded to know what was wanted from him, as he made it clear he was trying to sleep. Enraged, struggled violently against his captor, shouting that they should let him go. Momentarily embarrassed, admitted his mistake and released the other person, assuring them they should now be able to move. With anger flashing in his eyes, lashed out and accused our boy of being a creep. The school's top beauty, known for her composure and talent, glanced up from her book with an annoyed expression to quietly reprimand her noisy classmate, making it clear she expected more decorum. With a defiant glare, beautiful, demanding to know if they intended to provoke a confrontation. Suddenly a woman confronted with determined energy, startling him so much that he could only gasp in shock. However, before he could react further, stepped in assertively, warning that they were dangerously close to breaking school rules and making it clear, through both her words and stern demeanor, that she was a stickler for regulations as a dedicated student council member. Exuding his usual defiance, lounged on the desk and argued back when warned him to stop, prompting to assert herself in the escalating classroom confrontation. Meanwhile, as tension simmered in the chaotic classroom, from the commotion and rested his head on his arms, choosing calm indifference over confrontation. Slept deeply, his expression peaceful as he rested his head on his arm. Suddenly lying tense and wide-eyed, suddenly sensed something unusual, his wariness heightening as he tried to identify the disturbance. A suspenseful blue glow suddenly emerged from beneath his desk, catching off guard as he tried to understand its source. In an instant, the intricate magical circle erupted with blinding energy, its surge intensifying the tension that gripped the room. We then see beneath the looming pillars, the ominous silence is broken only by the sight of students sprawled across the tiled floor, each one unconscious and utterly defeated after the devastating ordeal. Meanwhile, slowly regained consciousness in the dim, unfamiliar space, his confusion evident as he wondered aloud where he could possibly be. Cautiously assessed the imposing stone doorway, noting that the only available cover lay behind thick columns and realizing there was just a single way in or out. As another clutched his head in confusion and students, startled, questioned what had happened. Visibly worried yet determined, stepped forward to reassure the anxious crowd, urging everyone to remain calm and explaining that although he was unsure of the situation, he needed to ensure everyone's safety. Moments later, as the tension eased, quietly acknowledged to himself that thanks to his actions, the group was finally beginning to settle down. Determined to take charge, told the group they needed to assess the situation and called for his minions to follow him. His tone firm and calculated, interrupted to acknowledge his point but insisted he stop there, heightening the tension in the room. Startled, demanded to know what was happening, while, his worry evident, warned him that he could hear footsteps approaching from the other side of the imposing double doors. As the enormous, intricately carved doors swing open, a blinding cascade of light pours into the space, filling the air with a palpable sense of awe. Emerging in a blaze of light and swirling mist, and made a grand, unforgettable entrance that commanded the attention of everyone present. Offered gentle praise, remarking with a kind smile that she was not surprised by how quickly they had regained their composure, reaffirming her confidence in the hero candidates. As the newcomers stepped into view, the students, awestruck and curious, whispered among themselves, with one marveling at the girl's beauty, another questioning their medieval attire, and a third, growing more intrigued, remarking that she might have mentioned something about heroes. Leaned against the pillar, his wary gaze fixed on the approaching figure, as he assessed that the newcomer's stance and attire marked him as a true swordsman rather than someone in mere costume. Meanwhile, his attention shifted to the serene white-haired woman, noting that although she appeared composed and hinted at some training, nothing else about her stood out. Just then the woman introduced herself as Grand Priestess of the Holy Nation of, and calmly presented her escort to the assembled group, setting a formal and anticipatory tone. Visibly irritated, challenged the legitimacy of the claim by demanding to know what kind of prank this was, and insisting that such a country could not exist. In response, gently reassured him that this was not a prank, and expressed her understanding of why he found the situation difficult to believe. Stepped forward among the uncertain group, earnestly apologizing on behalf of everyone and explaining that they were still struggling to understand what had happened to them. With unwavering confidence, affirmed her purpose for being there, while watched her resolute declaration in silence. Then maintaining her serious tone, she explained that, to put it simply, they had been summoned to another world. Her expression solemn, delivered the grave proclamation that, as hero candidates, they alone remained humanity's final hope against the relentless demon lord. Among the skeptical crowd, admitted with uncertainty that the claim sounded unbelievable, while quickly voiced his disbelief, insisting it made no sense. Clearly annoyed, admonished to show respect to the saintess, while he, refusing to back down, defiantly warned the older man not to boss him around, or he would retaliate. In response, his demeanor turning menacing, reached decisively for his sword, and warned that was the sort who needed to learn his place. However, quickly intervened, her voice tense as she urged to stop, insisting that while might be ignorant of their world, he would not tolerate anyone showing such defiance. Fueled by anger from, charged at, and shouted that since this was what he wanted, he would give it to him, while remained calm and braced for the attack. From the shadows, assessed boldness, silently acknowledging that it took nerve to rush at someone armed with a sword. Seizing his chance, swung his sword in a sudden, focused slash, clashing with in a burst of intense speed. Shaken and fearful as blood drips from his forehead, admitted that his opponent's sword had moved too quickly for him to follow, noted that the cut was shallow this time, and warned of the consequences if there was a next. Suddenly, the entire hall erupted in alarm when, along with his classmates, gasped and cried out in shock at the unexpected event. However, calmly asserted that his point had been made and instructed for swords to be sheathed, while accepted her command with a measured nod, bringing an air of resolution to the tense hall. Her tone resolute as she sought to diffuse the tension, apologized for her knight's earlier aggression, and made it clear to the others that they meant no harm. Before anyone could respond, stepped forward with determination and assured the group that she would reveal everything about the world they now faced. Stood grimly in the dim light listening, as she announced to the room why everyone had been summoned there. With a piercing yellow gaze and commanding presence, demanded that everyone remain silent and pay close attention. In the shadowy, ruined hall, gravely informed the assembled students that their world now stood on the brink of extinction as a result of the demon lord's invasion. With a heavy heart, quietly confessed her nation's ongoing struggle, her solemn demeanor betraying deep worry as she admitted that the holy nation had been fighting back, but their efforts were faltering. In the next moment, she lowered her gaze, and her voice heavy with defeat, admitted that they had been unable to stop the invasion. Sitting pensively by the pillar with a jaded air, dismissed concerns about the demon lord as nothing more than the same old story. Amid the solemn hush, radiating calm authority, proclaimed with quiet resolve that the fate of hope now rested upon the hero candidates. As her words settled over them, his voice edged with anxiety, asked whether it truly fell to them to defeat the demon lord, while the group around him reacted with a mixture of shock and determination. In the hallway, anxiously questioned how they were expected to accomplish such an impossible task, while uneasily admitted that none of them had ever fought before, their shared doubt intensifying the tension between them. Suddenly, students broke down in tears, confessing in a trembling voice that some of them could barely handle the situation and desperately begging to be sent back home. With a determined glint in his eyes, the stern mentor confronted his guest and insisted that, whether they liked it or not, they were here, and that the only way back to their world was defeating the demon lord. It was the only path forward, leaving no room for alternatives. Reeling from the shocking revelation, stammered in disbelief that it simply couldn't be true, while stood beside him, equally shaken and unable to process what they had just learned. Hidden behind the wall with uncertainty clouding his gaze, silently questioned whether was being honest or merely trying to harden them with his stern resolve. However, as he mulled over his intentions, reasoned that no matter how much the group was pushed, they would not become killers overnight, emphasizing in his mind the crucial need for both experience and innate talent. Blood staining his mouth, angrily confronted the two and accused them of having called everyone together only for their own selfish reasons. He demanded in frustration whether they truly had no other options left, his voice echoing the desperation that lingered from his earlier accusation. With a furious glare and a menacing grin, condemned his enemy, declaring with disgust that they were the worst kind of scum. Observing with a stern and reflective gaze, acknowledged to himself that although the guy still refused to yield, this unyielding spirit revealed true promise as a warrior. Just then concluded that the potential for trouble was too great and prepared to eliminate his target, his hand reaching ominously for his weapon. Meanwhile, stepped forward with compassion, channeling healing magic into, and softly invoking that his wound be healed as watched the ritual with unwavering attention. Astonished, realized that his wound had unexpectedly healed as he inspected his face, unable to believe the miraculous recovery unfolding before him. With a contrite bow and gentle light illuminating her, offered a heartfelt apology for the group's earlier rudeness and sincerely asked for forgiveness. Startled by the sudden, mysterious glow, looked around in confusion and asked the others what had just occurred and what the strange light could be. Amidst a majestic glow, stood serenely with radiant energy swirling in her hands, explaining that law sorcery was an ability granted by the Creator God, which allowed her to temporarily rewrite the fabric of reality. Building on this, she calmly clarified that, by their understanding, such a phenomenon would be called magic. Meanwhile, still wary, pieced together that their adversaries must have summoned before, given their knowledge of his world. At that moment, her tone grave, revealed to him that his unique ability was the primary reason for his summoning, leaving them stunned by the weight of her words. Raised her glowing hand toward, her confidence radiating as she prepared to bless the amazed man with a surge of hope-filled magic. However, as her radiant energy approached, he jolted in shock, his wide eyes and tense posture betraying the overwhelming impact of the moment. Suddenly, recoiled in shock as she exclaimed that his hand was glowing, the unexpected surge of supernatural light intensifying the tension between them. Stared in amazement as light streaming from his hand coalesced into a glowing sword, leaving him stunned by the sudden manifestation of his newfound power. With a gentle expression, the serene woman clasped her hands and reassured them that her law energy could awaken their blessings. With a somber expression, the white-haired woman clasped her hands and acknowledged with regret that being summoned without a way home was terribly unfair. However, she pressed on, pleading with the group in a trembling voice that she understood their hardship, but begged them to lend their strength. Admitted anxiously that even with their powers awakened, none of them knew how to wield these new abilities. Her expression, calm and assured in ceremonial attire, explained that strict training would be necessary and promised that the nation would fully support them during this period. His expression, serious and determined, acknowledged the instructions with quiet acceptance. His voice, urgent and determined, called for everyone's attention and insisted that they needed both protection and knowledge to survive, while listened with growing concern in the background. His tone, resolute, urged the other students to trust in their blessings and suggested they follow her instructions for now. After a brief pause, exchanging thoughtful glances, they expressed their agreement with his proposal, their voices carrying a mix of composure and reluctant acceptance as the group reached a quiet consensus. As the atmosphere grew reverent, bowed her head in solemn concentration, expressing her gratitude to the group and announcing that she was about to release the blessings within each of them. With a curious glint in her eyes, demonstrated her telekinetic blessing by concentrating intently, causing a pen to float in midair as she calmly acknowledged her ability. Suddenly, radiating fierce confidence, unleashed a burst of explosive power from his hand as he proclaimed the activation of his blessing. Explosion, shifting the atmosphere from calm display to a surge of raw energy. Meanwhile, the group of students each revealed their unique elemental abilities. Standing before the restless group, calmly asked if everyone was done, while watched over the gathering with a serious gaze as low murmurs rippled through the students. However, before the murmurs could settle, confidently raised his hand and asserted that he was the last one, drawing surprised reactions from the students. With composed grace, apologized for not noticing sooner and announced that the ceremony would now begin, gently pressing her glowing fingers to his chest as he stood focused and ready. However, as her touch lingered, suddenly grew startled, sensing something was wrong with his vision as a glowing eye flared open amidst a surge of crackling energy and light. Moments later, a futuristic display illuminated his profile and abilities, her calm composure revealing not only her high magical potential, but also a serene confidence that left watching in awe. Stared ahead with focused, crimson eyes, as revealed the unusual blessing of appraisal and exuding a sense of intrigue. His curiosity piqued, asked about appraisal, prompting her to calmly explain that it is an ability providing detailed information about a target. Now, with determination flaring in his eyes, he focused on his glowing hand, quietly resolving to test the mysterious energy surging around him. At that pivotal moment, a sleek stat screen materialized before him, systematically revealing his strengths, weaknesses, and the remarkable abilities that set him apart. Curiously analyzed the floating digital status screen, remarking to himself that its game-like layout made his abilities easy to understand. Suddenly, his eyes blazed crimson as something caught his attention, the intensity in the air shifting. Just then, with fierce determination, unleashed a devastating fiery attack that erupted in a massive explosion, shaking the battlefield with its explosive force. As the smoke cleared from the blast, backwards while, still motionless after causing the attack, with a triumphant grin and eyes aglow, demonstrated his explosive power, boasting to that what he had just witnessed was the true extent of his abilities. Stood silently, his red eyes glowing as skeptically questioned whether that was the extent of his ability. Meanwhile, wearing a smug grin, taunted that deserved his misfortune for always acting superior, her mocking laughter echoing as he remained alone and shrouded in shadow. Standing pensively among the students, questioned to himself why the students had become so confident, reflecting with worry that their limited information made it impossible to know which ability would prove crucial and cautioning inwardly that blessings were merely borrowed power, vulnerable to being taken away at any moment. However, as he glanced sharply forward, his expression cold, hinted ominously to himself that killing did not require a blessing, since there were plenty of other, darker methods available. Standing before the assembled students in the grand hall, announced with resolute authority that she had confirmed each of their blessings, assuring them that although mastery would be difficult, these powers would eventually become the blades to pierce the demon lord. With a gentle clap of her hands and a soothing smile, encouraged everyone to rest, assuring them that the long day was finally over. Later that first night, each student was quietly guided to their own softly lit room, filling the atmosphere with calm anticipation. However, driven by determination, decided he needed to gather intelligence before bed and quietly slipped out his window to begin his covert reconnaissance. As two vigilant guards patrolled the shadowy castle wall, one of them voiced his concern about the late patrol and the difficulty of seeing anything in the darkness, while another agreed that with the hero candidates present, they could not afford to lower their guard. As the two armored guards patrolled the torchlit night, one voiced skepticism about the hero candidate's abilities, while the other agreed, noting with dismissive certainty that the rookies still looked untested and inexperienced. However, their conversation ended with one guard remarking that, despite their doubts, Saintes must have a strategy in mind for the impossible task ahead. Wary as he hides behind the shadowy tree, notes that this is already the third patrol he's encountered tonight, and judging from their words and behavior, realizes that security around the perimeter is exceptionally tight. In a sudden, ominous moment, activated his appraisal skill on the guards. Meanwhile, in the moonlit courtyard, the guard stood before a glowing status screen that revealed his unremarkable abilities, with sword mastery as his sole skill. As darted furtively down the dimly lit path, casting wary glances over his shoulder, he reassured himself that although he had feared lost sorcery might reveal his secret, he now realized not everyone possessed the ability to use it. Moments later, with determination sharpening his features, he reported that he had already completed a swift sweep of the castle. Atop a hill, a formidable fortress rises at the center of the walled town, as projected that the they lived in was a standard one. Meanwhile, concealed in the shadows as he studied the guarded gate, reasoned that although he wanted to see what lay within the walls, the heavy presence of guards and the complex layout made infiltration nearly impossible. Moving cautiously through the tall grass, decided he had gathered enough information for the night and, still alert, as just then something caught his attention. Surveyed the open field beneath the star-studded sky, with her remarking that the spot seemed ideal and noting its emptiness. As the two schoolgirls debated sneaking out under the cover of night, one voiced her worries about breaking the rules, while another confidently reassured her that they were simply practicing their blessings and would be fine. Unfazed, conjured a small blaze at her fingertip and remarked that only might get upset, but since no one could sleep, that practice was actually a benefit for them all. Under the energetic night sky, summoned flames with fierce determination, while another nervously cast a shimmering green light and another unleashed a surge of water, each girl displaying her unique magic as they practiced together outdoors. Hidden in the shadows, watched the girls with unwavering alertness like peeping Tom he is. Meanwhile, examined the conjured flame in her hands with thoughtful curiosity, reflecting that although he still had many questions about blessings, observing the others' practice might provide him with some answers. Stood paralyzed, his body trembling as a chilling wave of fear washed over him in the oppressive darkness. Suddenly, startled by an unseen presence, he spun around behind cover and urgently reported that he sensed something, his eyes locking onto whatever standing in the shadows. The girl asked anxiously if anyone else could hear the mysterious sound rustling through the tall grass as she stood frozen in the moonlit field. Her voice trembling, wondered aloud what the noise could be, while the tension among the three girls mounted as they exchanged uneasy glances in the deepening dusk. Suddenly, an ominous presence fills the air as an enormous armored reptilian creature bursts through the grass, its emergence sending a chill down the spine of all who witness it. At that moment, cried out in disbelief, and another echoed her alarm, both girls unable to comprehend the terrifying sight looming above them as they stood frozen in shock. Hidden in the bushes under the moonlight, warily observed a strange lizard-like creature unlike anything from their world, while three classmates stood nearby, curiosity and unease written on their faces. Suddenly, his eyes flashed a fierce red as he resolutely invoked his appraisal ability, determined to uncover the creature's secrets. Studying the digital panel that revealed the Veil Lizard's formidable stats, realized in shock that its abilities far surpassed those of the others, leaving him deeply alarmed. Suddenly, the monstrous Veil Lizard erupted with a deafening roar, its aggression shaking everyone even further as the danger became terrifyingly real. Her voice cracking with terror, screamed as she led the others in a frantic escape, their panic palpable as they fled together from the monster. Tall grass whipped around them as the monstrous creature gave relentless chase, forcing the girls to sprint for their lives, panic and desperation etched on their faces. Meanwhile, noticed that the creature was hostile and had attacked without warning, as he watched the sudden assault with tense focus from his vantage point. As the massive beast barreled straight ahead, noticed it became clear that while its speed on 4 legs was impressive, its lack of cunning betrayed its limited intelligence. While anxiously strategizing, reasoned that the creature's scales appeared tough, but believed a knife could cut through, brandishing his knife like he's in Assassin's Creed. Sprang from the ledge with sharp focus, narrowly throwing the knife that sliced through the air. Suddenly, the blade plunged violently into the monster, sending blood splattering across the scene and intensifying the chaos. Watched anxiously from behind a tree as his knife struck the wounded dragon-like creature, but soon realized with concern that the attack had barely harmed it. Meanwhile, the girls raced through the moonlit night, breath ragged and hearts pounding, desperately fleeing from the relentless monster now surging after them. As suddenly collapsed to the ground, the girl cried out her name in panic while another, alarmed, urged to hurry over and flee, leaving the girl. Meanwhile, wincing from the pain and still shaken, she sensed a menacing presence looming behind her, making the air thick with unease. Startled, she abruptly turned her head, sensing a threat and muttering in confusion as unease swept over her. Under the tense night sky, a massive lizard-like creature glared forward and issued a chilling, warning hiss. Meanwhile, her eyes wide with terror, gasped and realized with mounting panic that the creature stood just before her. Suddenly, a massive claw swung down toward the terrified, pink-haired girl as someone cried out her name in alarm. Instinctively, she shrank back and raised her arms to shield herself, her entire body trembling in terror as the unseen danger closed in. Just then, under the cold night sky, distressed, as the sound of the crash marked her desperate victory over her wounded foe. However, as the dust settled, she gazed up in stunned disbelief at the massive, wounded creature looming over her, barely able to comprehend the sight before her. Sensing distress, the girls rushed urgently to her side, her voice trembling with worry as she called out for her. In a shocking turn, leaving the girls nearby to wonder in stunned disbelief if someone had just intervened to save them. Sensing the tension in the air, urged the group to leave quickly, while another, her voice trembling with fear, agreed and admitted she didn't want to encounter another monster as they all hurried away. Alone beneath the quiet night sky, leaned against a tree, wrestling with conflicted thoughts as he wondered if the others were truly gone, and admitted to himself that, even though he didn't have to save them, it felt wrong to simply walk away. Kneeling over the slain monster beneath the starry sky, reflected warily on how unexpectedly he had encountered such a creature, and decided he would need to stay on guard in this unfamiliar world. Suddenly, his eyes flew wide with shock, as he instinctively reacted to something that made his sixth sense tingle like Spider-Man. Rushed determinedly to the side of the towering purple monster, taking cover to hide himself. However, as an eerie silence settled over the stone-strewn field, the ominous pause before action heightened the tension surrounding, and the looming dragon. His gaze sharp with wariness as he peered from beneath the monster, sensed that something was amiss. However, as tension hung in the air, he muttered to himself that he needed to leave. Just then our boy dashed away like the flash, leaving nothing behind. Just then, a hooded figure quietly emerged beside the ancient monolith, his stealthy approach marked only by the soft sound of his footsteps. With merciless intent, he brought his boot crashing down, blood splattering violently across the ground. Under the ominous night sky, the blood-stained, faceless figure expressed disdain, remarking that the hero candidates were nothing more than children. With a sinister grin and blood staining his lips, he revealed his suspicion that one among their foes carried the unmistakable scent of their own kind, his tongue flicking out in predatory anticipation. We transition without warning. The severed head of the colossal monster crashed to the ground, its lifeless tongue hanging out, and the shocking silence broken by the force of its fall. As the 4 students faced the monster, they nervously murmured in disgust, prompting an anxious gasp from the group as shock and dread swept over them. Informed the assembled students that a monstrous creature had appeared near the city, his tone underscoring the seriousness of the situation. Continuing with the same gravity, he warned that monsters served the demon lord, driven by violence and hunger for human flesh, and cautioned the students that they would soon face these threats themselves before asking 4 Eyes if he had something to contribute. The nerd confidently deduced that traces of demonism found in the body were likely cast by a high-ranking demon, suggesting with curiosity that such an act might have been a test for the hero candidate's strength. Still pondering this revelation, wondered aloud whether demonism was a separate force from law sorcery, his curiosity sharpening as he sought to grasp the differences between these mysterious arts. His concern evident, questioned the nerd whether the monster on the floor had been under a demon's control as he gestured toward the furry creature. In response, the nerd, confident and unfazed, explained that powerful demons possess a skill called subjugation, allowing them to bind and control monsters. Remarked among himself that Nerd Boy was a researcher and would make a valuable source of information. As stared intensely at the defeated monster's corpse, a chilling realization struck him. This creature had been under someone else's control. A colossal, menacing demon emerged amidst raging flames and smoke, as revealed that the ominous presence he sensed the previous night was indeed a demon. However, remaining tense and vigilant as he scanned the area, admitted to himself that he had only sensed the presence for a fleeting moment and suspected the elusive threat might still be nearby. As shadowy figures watches him from afar, stands isolated, his entire body shuddering in response to the mounting tension. Issued a chilling warning that the hidden threat might still be lurking nearby, his words amplifying the ominous tension in the swirling darkness. As murmurs and gasps ripple through the anxious crowd, is visibly startled, his composure slipping. However, regaining his focus, confronts with fierce determination, declaring that if defeating the demon lord is the only way home, he is ready to accept the challenge and refuses to remain in this world any longer than necessary. Facing each other with determination, acknowledged that was right for once, and agreed that if they wanted to return home, they would have to fight together. Meanwhile, gazed ahead with a grave expression, reflecting that this battle was a sobering reminder for those who still saw it as a game, insisting to himself that fighting for survival remained their only constant, no matter what world they found themselves in. Stepped forward with composed grace, gently urging everyone to remain calm and assuring them there was no need for haste. Standing serenely with her eyes closed, advised that mastering one's powers would require both training and time. Now, opening her eyes and facing the gathered candidates, she solemnly announced that they had been chosen from another world as hero candidates, and assured them they would grow and learn faster than ordinary people. A week has quietly slipped by since the students began their training, and now sits alone at a library table, deeply focused on his studies as the calm, studious atmosphere settles around him. As he reached for a piece of paper, a curious realization dawned on him that they had never struggled to understand or communicate in any language, a fact that now seemed both remarkable and strangely unnoticed until this moment. Deep in thought as he pored over the open book, was suddenly startled by the clamor outside, halting his research mid-sentence. Moments later, the energetic commotion on the training grounds drew his attention, where students, driven by determination and focus, practiced their sword techniques beneath the watchful gaze of their mentors. Reflected with resignation on how, since his appraisal ability was not suited for combat, he had been excluded from training and instead permitted to spend his days alone in the library. Now, as he sifted through yet another stack of history and civilization books, admitted to himself with growing frustration that, as expected, none of the volumes contained any trace of information about demons. Just then, as he lingered thoughtfully in the shadows, a voice echoed nearby, marveling at the group's rapid progress and mentioning that had been right about everyone's improvement, prompting to observe the scene with quiet, analytical pride. However, as he continued to survey the group, he realized with astonishment that among them, one individual was advancing at a truly extraordinary rate. Astonished and sweating, a guard conceded defeat, admitting with deep respect that his opponent's progress had already surpassed his own in such a short time. With a bright grin under the blue sky, warmly expressed his gratitude to his mentor, crediting all his progress to his excellent guidance. However, in the next instant, eyes blazed with a fierce red glow as he activated his power. A futuristic status screen revealed his astonishing leap in power, displaying stats that had soared from mediocrity just a week prior and leaving shocked by his transformation. Gazed into the distance, his mind racing with curiosity as he pondered whether the blessing could influence aspects beyond one's innate abilities, given the astonishing pace of the prodigy's growth. However, before he could dwell any further, a group approached with mocking grins, jeering that he had no place on the training grounds and should stick to his books, their taunts echoing as he stood his ground in silent defiance. Stood wary as he assessed his pursuers, reflecting that he understood why the two were so intent on cornering him, since they'd always behaved this way toward him. However, he could not understand why the others seemed to look down on him, his defiance sharpening as he questioned their judgment. Meanwhile, wondered if the newly empowered group now believed themselves superior. The man, his annoyance clear as he reached out aggressively, pressing our boy for an answer, and remarked with frustration that his attempt to be friendly was being ignored. In a tense instant, swiftly swept the man's foot as it sliced across the ground. Suddenly, the man was forcefully thrown to the ground, his body slamming down with a violent thud as he lay stunned by the impact. Meanwhile, rushed to the man's side, his voice sarcastic with worry as he asked if the guy was all right after witnessing him suddenly collapse. Clearly caught off guard, stammered in confusion as the man, flustered and embarrassed on the ground, tried to retort while the surrounding crowd whispered and watched the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and amusement. His expression serious, warned his ally to stop whatever they were doing and alerted them that she was approaching. Moments later, as tension lingered in the air, emerged gracefully from the shadows, her calm presence contrasting with his vigilant stance at the threshold. With a serene smile and gentle light radiating from her, expressed her gratitude to the gathered audience. Building on that recognition, she proudly informed the group that their rapid progress had prompted her to accelerate the schedule, her words igniting a sense of anticipation among and his companions. His anxiety evident, questioned whether they were truly about to face the demon lord so soon, while maintaining her composure, reassured him that she did not expect such a feat from him, yet as the others watched the exchange with concern. With unwavering resolve, she then informed them that next step would be to begin combat training against monsters. The announcement of upcoming combat training against monsters sent a wave of shock and concern through the 5 students, each processing the daunting news with varying degrees of anxiety and determination. In a forest clearing, calmly announced to the assembled students that their combat training would take place among the woods, as anticipation stirred quietly through the group. In the dappled sunlight of the forest, the stern mentor laid down a crucial rule, explaining that fighting together as a group would not benefit his trainees. However, as the tension eased, gently smiled and instructed the group to instead form teams of 2 or 3, her calm demeanor signaling a new phase in their training. In response, eagerly suggested teaming up with, who agreed calmly, while another approached with hopeful excitement to ask if she could join their group as well. As the duo enthusiastically promised to handle any monsters that might threaten him, responded with a dismissive indifference, unmoved by their support. As cheerfully encouraged her that teaming up would be great, hesitantly questioned how they ended up together, her reluctance clear beside his optimism. Meanwhile, noticing the uncertainty in the group, attentively asked whether everyone had formed their teams, his gaze sweeping over the gathered students as he waited for confirmation. Caught in an awkward standoff beneath the forest, demanded to know what was going on between them, while visibly frustrated and brooding in silence, refused to break their uneasy quiet. Confronted the group with an annoyed edge, demanding to know why no one had asked her, while the others, startled by her intimidating presence, nervously admitted that she was simply too scary to approach. However, sensing her limited options, admitted with resignation that they would have to work together, while readily agreed, assuring her that he didn't mind forming the alliance. As initiated an uneasy conversation, demanded to know why he was staring at her, prompting him to calmly reply that he had no particular reason and that he looked forward to working with her, while a sense of awkward anticipation lingered between them. With an enthusiastic spark, announced to the eager students that she would grant a special reward to the team defeating the most monsters, urging everyone to give their best as watched calmly by her side. We transitioned to the middle of the forest, as the two moved warily through the forest clearing. Confidently stepped forward, asserting her dominance as she proclaimed that her blessing was the strongest and instructed to simply stay out of her way. In response, remained composed as he calmly delegated the task of handling the monsters to her, signaling his trust in his abilities. As strode past the hooded with cool detachment, she remarked with an air of superiority that he clearly lacked any sense of pride, leaving him standing sullen and silent among the trees. However, as he lingered amid the shadows, his eyes sharpened with anticipation as he considered that this moment would offer an ideal opportunity to gauge his abilities. Standing alone in the shadowy forest and sensing imminent danger, warned in a wary voice that he detected 4 monsters nearby and realized they were surrounded. Suddenly, a menacing goblin emerged from the bush, brandishing its club with a guttural snarl as it confronted the duo, radiating aggressive intent. Alarmed as she confronted the growling creature, shouted that there was a monster while watched her intently from afar. Suddenly, the goblin-like creature lunged forward with a frenzied dash, brandishing its club as its sharp teeth gleamed in the chaos. With urgent determination, told the goblin to get down. Suddenly, the monstrous creature crashes violently to the ground, its impact reverberating through the air as a glowing aura pulses around it. As demonstrated her ominous mind control power in the shadowed forest, noticed clearly that her blessing compelled any target to obey her every command. Meanwhile, as detected more hidden threats nearby with determined focus, tense and apprehensive, acknowledged his warning and assured him she understood. Visibly drained and struggling to catch her breath, explained to her companion that using her blessing had left her utterly exhausted. However, noticing her fatigue, remarked that her ability consumed a great deal of law energy and urged her to finish quickly since more threats were approaching, prompting to react in surprise. His voice trembling with hesitation, questioned whether they should kill the creature, unable to ignore how human it seemed as it emitted a distressed growl. However, hardening his expression, he argued with unwavering resolve that the creature had attacked them and insisted there was no reason to show mercy to their enemies. Hesitated, her unease clear, as she admitted that she understood but still felt uncertain. Meanwhile, his focus unwavering, picked up a sharp stone with calculated intent, silently noting that despite her powers, was still approaching the situation with an ordinary mindset. His purple eyes reflecting a pensive mood as he flicked a small object in his hand, silently questioned whether she truly possessed the resolve to pull the trigger when it mattered most. Meanwhile, deep within the shadowy forest, 3 goblins emerged from the bushes, their wooden clubs gripped tightly as they advanced with hostile intent, the menacing shuffle of their feet signaling the beginning of an ambush. Suddenly, as the monstrous, goblin-like creatures crashed down amid crackling energy, shouted for them to get down. Meanwhile, as struggled to channel her magic under pressure, she demanded that stop standing idly by and help, while he retorted defensively that she had told him not to interfere. Frustrated but unable to refuse, begrudgingly conceded to the demand, her annoyance clear even as she agreed to do it herself. With fierce determination, unleashed a deadly pink spell and commanded the monsters to twist their own necks until they snapped. Suddenly, 3 monstrous figures clutched their heads in agony as blinding blue energy erupted from within them, the intensity of the force overwhelming as they twisted their necks in one motion. Still surprised by the unexpected success, exchanged reflective remarks with, admitting their disbelief, and she noted that the more difficult the command, the less likely it was to work. Meanwhile, covering her mouth with worry, privately questioned whether she had made the right choice after witnessing the monsters up close. Resolute amidst the grim aftermath, explained too that their actions were justified because the others had attacked first and were their enemies. With unflinching determination burning in his gaze, he added that regardless of whether their enemies were monsters or humans, they would have to kill to survive. With a skeptical gaze, questions composure, remarking that he seemed unusually calm despite not being particularly strong. In response, remarked with a confident air that boldness was his forte, then after inspecting the defeated creature, he observed with mild disappointment that it was nothing out of the ordinary, while watched on, her curiosity undimmed. His expression tense and uncertain, asked whether they should continue forward or turn back, his worry evident as he assessed their next move. In response, her determination unwavering, insisted that there was no chance of retreat and urged them to press on as she strode confidently ahead through the forest. As she walked alone down the sunlit forest path, noticed that despite her tough exterior, he was beginning to recognize her own hidden strengths and would soon be ready for a real fight. Suddenly, burst through the forest in a panic, with he anxiously demanding what they should do next and another retorting in frustration that he had no answers, both recalling that the monsters were supposed to be weak, but now realizing the situation was far more dangerous than expected. Urged that they had to fight while promised to back him up, both unleashing powerful wind and earth magic together, as determination and urgency crackled in the air. With unwavering focus and determination, they both unleashed a swirling beam of energy together, their combined powers crashing against the massive, unseen enemy. Suddenly, the attack exploded into fragments, as massive monster took the attack head-on, literally. Suddenly, the ground trembled ominously as the massive beast with its red, armored limbs revealed to be completely unscathed by the attack. In the chaotic aftermath, overwhelmed by panic, exclaimed to that their attack had done nothing to harm the creature, and anxiously questioned what kind of monstrous being they were facing. Suddenly, a massive beast clad in red armor-like plating made a dramatic entrance, its glowing eyes fixed forward as drool dripped menacingly from its jaws. We cut back as voiced his concern that continuing straight might get them lost, while she insisted that the path was obvious since it's straight, their wary tones underscoring the uncertainty between them. Just then delivered a pointed remark, insisting that the other person clearly did not understand how forests truly worked. As they made their way through the forest, cast a resentful glance at, internally fuming over his smug attitude and questioning what gave him such confidence. As asked why she was staring, her defensive response only heightened the tension, leaving even more uncertain about the feelings she was trying so hard to hide. Suddenly a piercing scream shattered the uneasy calm, and both, startled and worried, reacted with alarm as cried out in fear, and she anxiously wondered if the scream had come from. Sensing trouble in the tense forest air, asked what their plan would be, his voice betraying a serious resolve as watched him anxiously from behind. As strode forward with determination along the forest path, she assured that they would lend their support, though she admitted her concern about whether they would arrive in time. Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, reacted with wide-eyed astonishment as he admitted he hadn't expected her to help at all. With determination blazing in her eyes, she rejected the accusation of being cold-hearted and urgently insisted that they move forward. Crashed heavily onto the ground, her body racked with pain and her desperation evident in every movement. Meanwhile, his voice trembling with alarm, frantically called out to check if was okay, his concern heightened by the sight of his painful fall. Despite her battered state, she insisted with defiant urgency that she was fine and urged her companion to leave, concealing the pain behind her labored breaths. His voice shaking with desperation, refused to leave behind as he grabbed her, determined to stay by her side despite her injuries. Just then, bracing himself under mounting pressure, stared ahead with anxious determination etched across his face. Caught off guard and alarmed as the monstrous, red-eyed beast raised its claw to strike, he cursed under his breath at the sudden peril. Suddenly someone, their voice ringing with authority, commanded the rampaging beast to halt as glowing magical energy restrained its massive paw mid-attack. His voice trembling with relief and panic, called out for, and just as she stated to, that she was barely able to hold on, while she strained to maintain the glowing magical spell between them. His face shadowed with intensity, analyzed the shifting nature of the blessing's power, and then asked about's condition. Kneeling anxiously beside unconscious, he checked her condition, as voice urgently informed him that although she was in pain, she was still breathing. Suddenly, his determination sharpened, as he commanded the other to grab her and evacuate immediately. Despite his obvious anxiety, insisted that he should be allowed to help, his voice trembling with earnest concern. However, battered and barely able to stand, as asked if he wanted to abandon, her ragged breaths punctuating her determination as she struggled. His resolve hardening, assured that he would get to safety, while calmly instructed him to seek backup from, or, if needed before they split up in the shadowed forest. Meanwhile, as the air vibrated with ominous tremors, the monstrous bear revealed itself in full, its immense form radiating power that sent fear rippling through the darkness. With unwavering focus, activated his appraisal ability, his eyes glowing red as he announced his intent to assess what lay before him. Instantly, a digital overlay revealed the mutant armor bear's formidable stats, its defense ranked highest, and its status showed agitation and total subjugation, making the threat feel even more ominous as continued his analysis. A close-up reveals the creature's dense fur and menacing fangs, suggesting that its hide is especially thick and formidable. Feeling doubtful as he assessed the massive red-armored creature's imposing body, admitted to himself that he probably couldn't even leave a scratch on it. Suddenly, stumbled upon something interesting in the stats panel as he questioned what mutant meant. Overwhelmed and gasping for breath, desperately admitted that she couldn't hold on any longer as she began to lose control. Meanwhile, as strength faltered, the massive, red-armored beast erupted into the clearing, forcing to stand his ground with steely focus. After a tense wait, his resolve unwavering, urged the girl that had been given enough time and insisted they prepare to escape. Startled, she quickly turned in response to the sudden call, exclaiming in agreement. As was suddenly knocked to the ground, she reacted with shock, stammering in disbelief at what had just happened. Meanwhile, her voice trembling with terror, called out that her legs wouldn't move as she collapsed to her knees. Recognizing the urgency of the moment, moved swiftly reaching into his jacket, bracing himself for imminent danger as he admitted to himself that the situation was turning dire. Suddenly he threw a smoke grenade through the air, its path marked by urgency as the pin spins away. Suddenly, as the grenade lands, a monstrous cloud erupts, catching completely off guard and leaving her reeling in shock. Just then our boy Aura farming, and startled by the sudden closeness as held her protectively against the tree, gasped in shock, her heart pounding with surprise. Anxiously warned his companion to stay quiet, urgently pressing a hand over her own mouth in an effort to avoid attracting unwanted attention. And pressed themselves against the rough bark, hearts pounding as the massive red creature turned just inches away, every muscle tensed in anticipation of being discovered. However, as the creature moved on, glanced upward with unease, voicing her worry by asking what could have caused the smoke. With a sidelong, guarded expression, deceptively claimed that he had made the smoke grenade out of boredom during training, though he knew this was a lie. This guy calmly revealed an array of concealed weapons beneath his coat, explaining with pragmatic confidence that he always carried a few since being summoned, but was now reserving the last of them for true emergencies, a hallmark of an experienced assassin. His expression tense and partly hidden beneath his hood, as apologized anxiously and asking in a guarded tone what she had done wrong. Her expression serious yet gentle as sunlight, admitted that despite her earlier insistence on managing alone, she ultimately needed help, as encouraged her to express gratitude rather than apologize. In response, she placed her hand near her chest and softly expressed her gratitude, her green eyes reflecting a gentle warmth. Confronted about her aloofness, suggesting that if she treated others with the same kindness, they might find her more approachable, while she, caught off guard, defensively protested against his accusation. However, as tension lingered between them, nervously questioned what they should do next and suggested they run, but resolute, calmly reassured her there was no need to flee. Just then, the guy who thinks he's the main character strode forward in his armor, flanked by another, confronting the unseen monster with determination, as he declared the enemy would pay for hurting his friends. With fierce determination etched on his face, suddenly surged forward, initiating his attack with blinding speed. However, before it could strike, a massive beast unleashed a ferocious roar, its cry shaking the air and halting him in his tracks. Yet despite the creature's intimidating display, gathered his resolve and with fierce determination, dodged the bear's powerful attack at blinding speed. His focus unwavering, unleashed a powerful strike with his glowing sword against the towering armored beast. Meanwhile, as the battle raged, urgently warned to stay back so he wouldn't be harmed as she unleashed a burst of fiery power to protect him. Suddenly, a massive fireball hurtled down from above, its blazing heat intensifying the terror of the bear caught in its path. In the next instant, the bear-like creature was swallowed by a deafening explosion, flames consuming its form in a chaotic eruption. As the fiery chaos subsided, proud of her handiwork, declared with a satisfied smirk that her spell should ended the bear. As charged forward with his glowing sword, he praised for her impressive magic. Just then the bear unharmed as confronted the monstrous, roaring bear, the air crackled with tension and his determined resolve. Suddenly, her voice trembling with shock, demanded to know how the monstrous bear could still be moving, her disbelief amplifying. His face tense with concern, urgently urged to remain calm as pressure mounted around them. Explained that the beast, now visibly exhausted and weakened by the recent attack, struggles to catch its breath as he observed that her assault has slowed it down. His determination unwavering, strategized aloud that if the three of them worked together, they could bring down the looming threat, then asked if his teammates were ready. In response, announced with determination that she was ready, while another, though anxious, managed to voice her hesitant agreement as the two girls steeled themselves for the challenge ahead. Just then we see someone with a malicious smirk revealing his sharp fangs, as they ominously warned that it was only a matter of time before something would fall. Moments later, the shadowy forest seemed to darken further as the veteran assassin made his entrance, his confidence radiating an even greater sense of impending doom. The assassin commented that armor bears no longer posed a threat to them, as their astonishing progress was evident in the way they now battled with calm, unwavering confidence. However, as Delphis watched their progress, he decided with a menacing gleam that his patience had run out, and resolved to ambush his target immediately, his weapon catching the ominous glow of his triangular brooch. At that moment, surged forward with fierce determination, unleashing a powerful glowing sword strike against the red, monstrous foe as he let out a sharp cry of exertion. Blood poured from its wounds as the massive bear staggered and let out a guttural roar, its pain echoing through the tense forest. Seizing the moment, fiercely declared that the battle would end now, swinging his weapon forward with unwavering determination. As braced himself against the monstrous armored foe's electrified onslaught, the assassin hiding nearby taunted him by warning that he was about to get taught a lesson. With a predatory smile, Delphis issued a chilling warning that one should never lower their guard in battle. Delphis, his eyes glowing with malice as he licked his sword, issued a chilling warning that letting one's guard down for even a moment meant certain death. Suddenly, as ominous energy crackled in the darkness, Delphis' eyes widened in terror while he struggled against the overwhelming killing intent targeted towards him. Just then the menacing pressed his blade to Delphis' throat, making the terrified man freeze in place as sweat beaded down his face. Delphis, his voice trembling with disbelief, demanded to know how had managed to ambush him, the dagger pressed coldly against his throat in the ominous darkness. Eyes blazing with determination, recalled that his parents had always insisted the perfect moment to strike was when the enemy believed the fight was finished, steeling himself for a decisive move. In the shadowy depths of the forest, pressed a knife to the throat of the startled, armored Delphis, leaving the air thick with tension. Startled and uneasy, Delphis clenched his gloved hand, vowing internally to remember this moment while wondering how his opponent had managed to catch him off guard. Delphis soon, resolute in the face of danger, dismissed his doubts and decided that escaping was his only priority. With explosive determination, unleashed a decisive slash that tore through Delphis' legs one clean slice. However, the momentum of assault sent Delphis crashing painfully to the ground, where he clutched his legs in agony and cried out that his legs were hurt. Pressed the knife to his captive's throat, warning in a low, urgent voice that he wanted no attention drawn to their struggle as Delphis froze in fear beneath him. Without loosening his grip, he demanded answers from his captive, insisting he would release him if he cooperated, but the captive, defiant and breathless, retorted that he would never talk and demanded to know who his interrogator was. With a smug smirk, pinned Delphis beneath his blade and asserted that he, too, was someone who thrived in the shadows. Delphis lay sprawled on the ground, his eyes wide with terror as shock rippled through him in the aftermath of hearing what's said. With a tense focus in his eyes, confronted the man, explaining that he had sensed their presence all along and had cleverly used team to lure them out. Delphis, his breath ragged and sweat beading on his brow, asked if had suspected him from the very beginning. Expressing both caution and urgency, insisted that they needed information about demons and demanded to be told everything known about them. In response, the defiant villain sneered, sweat beading on his brow, and retorted that there was no way he would reveal anything. Delphis screamed in agony, his fanged face contorted with pain as sweat and tears streamed down his cheeks. Meanwhile, towering over him with a menacing glare, pressed his foot harder into Delphis' back and warned through ragged breaths that unless Delphis, things would only get worse. Despite his wounds, Delphis coughed violently and, glaring upward with unyielding resolve, warned not to underestimate him. Just then Delphis crunched down on his teeth. Suddenly, startled by what Delphis had just, he gasped in shock and wondered aloud if he was truly seeing what he thought. Delphis let out a guttural cry as he was bleeding from the mouth, violet blood spraying violently from the impact in a shocking display of pain. As the enemy collapsed and violet blood spattered the forest floor, remaining vigilant, revealed that the fallen foe had hidden a poison pill inside his mouth, a chilling confirmation of the deadly lengths their adversaries would go. Assessed the enemy with concern, noting that these demons seemed prepared and warning himself that defeating them would not be easy. Suddenly, as he remained tense from the enemy's presence, a glowing digital screen shimmered into existence before his face, leaving him startled and questioning what it could mean. Just then popped out from nowhere, trembling with fear as she confronted, anxiously asked if the person was dead before them. His purple eyes glowing with longing, called out too as he seemed shocked to see her. Suddenly wary, turned to and asked how long she had been standing there, his surprise betraying his unease at her unexpected presence. Her face pale with distress, stammered that ever since the man had collapsed. Just then revealed in hushed, fearful whispers that he had been one of the demon lord's assassins, leaving reeling at the mention of such a terrifying presence. Then surmised that its wild assault was likely being controlled by the same demon that died. At that moment it became clear that this same menacing man had once attacked, and the others as well using the control ability. Her anxiety evident, questioned whether they had just uncovered an attempt on their lives. Explained that it was logical for demons to target hero candidates, while, reflecting on her earlier assumptions, admitted she had been naive. Her green eyes filled with concern, questioned how had sensed the assassin's presence when no one else had noticed. His purple eyes burning with resolve beneath his hood, decided there was no longer any reason to keep his secret hidden. Stood menacingly over the fallen assassin in the forest clearing, revealing with chilling confidence that he came from a family of assassins and could sense one of his own. Meanwhile, recoiled in fear, demanding to know what he meant by assassins, as the shock of his revelation shattered her composure. Amid a grim and shocking atmosphere, pointed out with disbelief that whether she believed him or not, a dead body did lay nearby. His expression grave beneath the hood, quietly confided to that he did not want the others to learn about what had just happened. Then explained those nearby worried that getting hurt had already unsettled everyone and feared that taking further action might only worsen the situation. Meanwhile, still processing the unexpected information, admitted with a touch of surprise that she understood, but just that everything left her surprised. Questioned in a skeptical tone, she didn't think whether truly cared about anyone besides himself. However, brushing his hood aside with calm assurance, he explained to that the others simply lacked fighting experience, unlike our level 99 pro assassin over here. As menacingly looked over at the beautiful girl, like a lion seeing a prey. Thoughtfully considered that mind control might prove advantageous in the future, as he planned on using her. A tense hush fell over the crowd as they gathered solemnly around the unconscious girl, each face etched with worry and concern. Suddenly, the students all shared a startled reaction as they all recoiled at seeing the downed girl getting healed with magic. His voice trembling with worry, asked the girl if their injured companion would be all right, prompting her to respond with calm confidence that recovery would come within the hour. Moments later, he let out a relieved breath and, smiling, expressed his admiration for strength, remarking that despite how formidable their opponent had been, it was impressive he managed to defeat it. Standing confidently between the two girls like a wannabe MC, admitted with a relieved smile that he had only managed to make it through thanks to his two companions, while responded with an amused smirk. As the girls laughed joyfully in the foreground, leaned silently against the tree aura farming like always, observing the light-hearted moment with quiet composure. Then questioned about her staring, but she turned away with a dismissive gesture, insisting with irritation that nothing was wrong. Moments later, as Anne stepped into the clearing, she expressed her relief to the group, saying she was glad everyone was safe, the warmth in her voice easing the lingering tension among them. His frustration evident, confronted the two people and demanded to know where they had been. In response, explained with a stern seriousness that they had been watching from nearby, as it was their duty to keep an eye on them, prompting to react in shock and question why no help had been offered. The wise mentor calmly explained that helping would defeat the purpose of training, letting out a gentle sigh to emphasize his point. His voice trembling with distress, confronted in the leafy clearing, demanding to know how he could have let come so close to death. In response, the mentor fixed with an intense glare and gravely warned that in real combat, the stakes were always life and death. A tense atmosphere settled over the group, warned them that the battlefield ahead would be just as unforgiving, urging them to get used to it while grew uneasy, listened with determination, and reacted in shock. His frustration boiling over, confronted with an accusation that he had misled them about the strength of the monsters, while met his anger with a stern, unwavering gaze. Stepping forward into the sunlit forest, calmly revealed to the startled that the culprit was most likely a demon assassin, casting a heavy tension over the group. Explained with concern that armor bears did not usually appear in this area, and she suspected an assassin had brought one to test their abilities. Warned with concern that the assassin might still be nearby, prompting to agree anxiously that they would need to tighten security. However, her expression turning grave, she warned the group with urgency that unless they intensified their training, their lives would be in imminent danger. Confronted with frustration, insisting that pushing the group harder was unreasonable given how little time they'd had to recover from their first real fight, while she remained stoic and unmoved by his protest. With a chilling glare, demanded to know if they would rather choose death, her menace palpable in the darkness. Suddenly jumped back in fear, his face contorted in shock as the question in play lingered in the air. Confronted the two with a sharp, angry challenge about their treatment of those brought against their will. Confronting, stepped forward and made it clear that he intended to establish the boundaries. With a furious glare, issued a harsh warning, declaring that the students were nothing more than pawns of Saintess and commanding them not to defy her. Hearing this, the students, voices trembling with shock, questioned what they had just heard, prompting the rest of the group to react uneasily. Fueled by fury, threatened that would not make it out alive, prompting to urgently step between them and plead for him to calm down before things spiraled further. However, his frustration barely contained, demanded to know how anyone could remain so calm after hearing such news, his sharp glance challenging the tension in the air. Visibly alarmed and tense, urgently warned his companions that fighting their adversaries would mean making the entire nation their enemy, leaving them with no chance of victory. Before anyone could respond, maintaining a commanding presence, reinforced his authority by sternly acknowledging judgment and warning the group that as long as they remained obedient, he would treat them with leniency, but made it clear they were still merely useful pawns in his eyes. With a confident smirk, boldly remarked that they would be facing the entire nation together, his defiance shining through. Without hesitation, he yanked the pin from the device, declaring with fierce resolve that the challenge suited him perfectly as the air filled with the sound of his swift action. With vengeful fury, unleashed a massive explosion, shouting that he would see them in hell. As a massive explosion erupts in front of him, stands resolute and unyielding amid the chaos. With a smug grin, he taunted his opponent, asking how they liked the aftermath of his powerful attack as embers and smoke swirled around him. Just then, with fierce determination, unleashed a torrent of energy in a sweeping motion, the air crackling with the intensity of his powerful attack. The guy not holding back delivered a Mortal Kombat X-ray fatality to this dude, cracking his skull. Flawless victory. This guy, battered and grimacing in pain, struggled to recover from his injury as he let out a harsh cough, blood flecking his lips while he fought to stay conscious. As the tense silence deepened, the only sound was the ominous step of approaching, drawing the anxious eyes of every onlooker to some motionless form. With unwavering confidence, the older man taunted the scared students, boasting that even their greatest efforts would barely leave a mark on him. However, as the tension lingered, he turned to leave and warned them in a resolute tone that training would become even more challenging starting tomorrow, urging them to be prepared. Blood streaming down his face, glared with a vengeful grin as he furiously swore he would kill his enemy.